By dawn on August 6, 1945, Hiroshima had already been awake for hours. The city stirred in the humid summer darkness, a place of nearly 350 zero-zero souls compressed into 7 river channels that split the delta like fingers reaching toward the inland sea. This was a city built on water, shaped by it, dependent on it. The rivers gave Hiroshima its name, Wide Island, and its character. Bridges connected neighborhoods, ferries moved goods, and the constant presence of water kept the air heavy and warm even before sunrise. The war had been grinding on for years, but Hiroshima remained relatively untouched. While Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and dozens of other cities had burned under American firebombing raids, Hiroshima had been spared the worst. Some whispered it was being saved for something else. Others believed the rivers would prevent the kind of firestorm that had consumed other urban centers. Most simply went about their lives, grateful for whatever providence had kept the bombers away. Morning began before light. Factory workers rose at 4:30, 5 o'clock at the latest. The textile mills never truly stopped, operating in shifts that cycled through day and night. Women made up much of the workforce now, with so many men away. They dressed in simple work clothes, mompe, the practical baggy pants that had replaced kimonos for everyday wear. Wartime austerity had stripped away decorative elements from daily life. Everything was functional now. Everything served the larger effort. The streetcars started running before 6. Hiroshima took pride in its tram system, one of the most extensive in Japan outside the major metropolitan centers. The distinctive green and cream-colored cars rattled along tracks that connected the city's spread-out neighborhoods, packed with workers heading toward the factories concentrated in the eastern districts. The trams were crowded, hot, swaying as they rounded corners. People stood pressed together, silent mostly, conserving energy for the long day ahead. Through the windows, the city passed in segments, wooden houses with tile roofs, small shops beginning to open, the occasional concrete building standing out among the traditional architecture. Breakfast was modest. Rice, when available, though supplies had grown increasingly scarce. Miso soup thinned with whatever vegetables could be found. Pickled radish, green tea. The government rations provided the basics, but never quite enough. People grew what they could in small plots, bartered with neighbors, stretched every grain of rice as far as it would go. Children ate first. That was the rule in most households. Whatever remained was divided among the adults. The city center was already active by 7. Shopkeepers swept the sidewalks in front of their establishments, a ritual that had persisted through years of rationing and restriction. The main commercial district along Aioi Bridge and Hondori Street maintained its routines despite the war. Fewer goods on the shelves, certainly. Fewer customers with money to spend. But the forms of normalcy continued. A fishmonger arranging what little catch had come in that morning. A woman waiting outside a rice dealer, hoping her ration tickets would be honored. The mundane persistence of daily commerce. Hiroshima had always been known for its oysters. The waters of the inland sea produced some of the finest in Japan, cultivated in beds that had been worked for generations. Even now, with fishing restricted and supplies limited, the connection to the sea remained part of the city's identity. Old-timers remembered festivals celebrating the oyster harvest, elaborate preparations of the shellfish that had made Hiroshima famous across the region. Those celebrations had been suspended, but the memory persisted in quiet conversations, in hopes that such traditions might return. Government offices opened at 8 sharp. The prefectural headquarters, the city administration buildings, the various bureaus that managed wartime mobilization, all maintained strict schedules. Clerks arrived, hung their bags, settled at desks covered with papers and forms. The machinery of administration ground forward regardless of circumstances. Records had to be kept, reports filed, decisions made and documented. The war had increased the bureaucracy, not diminished it. Students gathered at their schools, though education had taken on a different character. The older boys were mostly gone, mobilized for labor or military service. Those who remained, younger children, girls, spent as much time on practical work as academic study. They learned to grow vegetables, to identify enemy aircraft, to respond to air raid warnings. Classes were held in buildings that doubled as community centers, stripped of anything non-essential. Desks, chalkboards, and little else. The military presence was everywhere but not overwhelming. Hiroshima housed regional army headquarters, training facilities, supply depots. Soldiers moved through the streets, but this was not an occupied city or a fortress. It was a functioning urban center that happened to serve military purposes. The distinction mattered. Civilians and military personnel shared the same streetcars, the same markets, the same neighborhoods. The boundaries between military and civilian life had grown porous after years of total war mobilization. Housing spread outward from the commercial core in a mix of wooden structures that had stood for decades, and newer, cheaper construction, thrown up to accommodate the influx of war workers. Most homes were single-story, with sliding doors and tatami mat floors. Families lived in close quarters, a few rooms shared among multiple generations when possible. Privacy was a luxury. Space was a luxury. People made do with what they had, arranging their lives around the constraints of wartime scarcity and urban density. The rivers dominated every neighborhood. The Oda split into 6 main channels as it reached the delta, creating distinct districts separated by water. The bridges were crucial, some permanent structures of concrete and steel, others temporary wooden spans that swayed underfoot. People learned their city by its bridges. Aioi Bridge, with its distinctive T-shape, was perhaps the most recognizable. Motoyasu Bridge led toward the old castle grounds. Misasa Bridge connected the eastern district. Each crossing had its own character, its own role in the circulation of people and goods. The local dialect carried its own music. Hiroshima Ben had distinctive features that marked its speakers instantly to anyone from other regions. Certain vowel sounds shifted. Particles took different forms. The rhythm of speech followed patterns unique to this corner of Western Honshu. Even children who had moved to the city from elsewhere picked up the accent quickly, their speech adapting to match their neighbors. Language rooted people to place as surely as the rivers did. Communication moved slowly. No private telephones in most homes. Important messages came through official channels or by hand delivery. News arrived via radio broadcasts that families gathered to hear in the evening, or through newspapers that appeared daily despite paper shortages. Information was controlled, filtered, shaped by military censors. What people knew of the war came through these official sources: reports of battles, exhortations to endure, reassurances that victory remained possible despite the mounting evidence to the contrary. Food had become the central preoccupation. The rationing system distributed rice, salt, soy sauce, and occasional supplements, but the amounts fell short of what people needed. Women spent hours in lines hoping to purchase additional supplies when they became available. The black market existed, though officially forbidden and dangerous to engage with. Some families had connections in the countryside, relatives who could send vegetables or eggs. Most made do with creativity and determination, preparing meals from whatever could be obtained or grown. Small gardens appeared in every available space. Rooftops, courtyards, narrow strips along walls. Anywhere soil could be placed and sunlight reached became a potential food source. People grew sweet potatoes, daikon radishes, leafy greens that matured quickly. These small plots made the difference between adequate nutrition and hunger. Neighbors sometimes pooled resources, sharing seeds, trading surplus, offering advice on cultivation techniques. Community gardens became spaces of cooperation and quiet resistance against the grinding pressure of wartime scarcity. The castle ruins stood on elevated ground near the city center, a reminder of Hiroshima's pre-modern past. The original structure had burned during the Meiji era, but the grounds remained, used now for military purposes. The stone walls still commanded views over the surrounding neighborhoods. From that vantage point, the city's geography became clear. The river channels cutting through dense urban fabric, the bridges linking the islands, the mountains rising in the distance to the north and east. Morning prayers happened in households across the city. The war had not diminished religious practice, though it had taken on new dimensions. People prayed for safety, for adequate food, for the return of family members serving far from home. Shinto and Buddhist traditions blended in most homes, practical and flexible as they had always been. Small household altars held photographs of ancestors, offerings of rice or water, incense when it could be obtained. The air raid warning system had been tested so many times that people had stopped reacting with urgency. Sirens wailed periodically, drills conducted, procedures practiced. The shelters, Mostly shallow trenches or reinforced basements were considered inadequate by anyone who understood what modern bombing could do. But Hiroshima had been spared so far. That fact bred a certain complacency, a sense that perhaps the worst would continue to pass them by. Factories operated at maximum capacity, producing whatever materials the military required. Machine parts, uniform components, supplies that would be shipped to other facilities for final assembly. The work was repetitive, often dangerous, always exhausting. Workers stood at stations for 10, 12, 14 hours, taking minimal breaks. Accidents happened. Machinery was old, safety standards had eroded, fatigue was universal. But production continued. The war demanded it. Children played in the spaces between adult concerns. They improvised games in narrow alleys, along riverbanks, in temple courtyards. Their play reflected the world around them. Mock air raids, soldier games, scavenging for useful materials. Childhood persisted. But it was a wartime childhood, shaped by absence and uncertainty. Many had lost fathers, older brothers, uncles. They lived with that knowledge the way they lived with the heat and the hunger, as an unchangeable fact of their existence. The streetscape mixed old and new without hierarchy. A concrete bank building stood next to a wooden noodle shop that had operated for 3 generations. Electric wires crossed above streets that had been cart paths a generation earlier. Modernity and tradition occupied the same space, neither fully displacing the other. This was characteristic of Japanese cities in this era. Rapid modernization layered over older patterns that refused to disappear entirely. Hiroshima's position as a port city had shaped its development over centuries. Though not as large as Kobe or Yokohama, it served as an important link between the inland sea and the interior. Goods flowed through its docks, raw materials inward, finished products outward. The port district bustled with activity even now, though the nature of cargo had shifted entirely to military purposes. Cranes lifted crates, workers loaded ships, the machinery of logistics operated without pause. Transportation was mostly by foot, bicycle, or streetcar. Private automobiles had disappeared, their metal and fuel requisitioned for military use. People walked long distances as a matter of routine. A commute of 5 kilometers was unremarkable. Shoes wore out quickly, and replacements were difficult to find. Some made do with wooden gaita sandals. Others wrapped cloth around their feet and hoped it would last. The morning of August 6th was clear and hot. The rainy season had ended, giving way to the intense heat of late summer. Humidity made the air feel thick, difficult to breathe. People moved more slowly in such weather, conserving energy, seeking shade when possible. The rivers offered some relief, a slight breeze off the water, the psychological comfort of seeing something cool and flowing. Neighborhood associations organized much of daily life. These traditional groups, strengthened during wartime, managed everything from fire prevention to rationing distribution to community defense. Block captains knew every household, tracked who lived where, ensured compliance with regulations. The system was efficient, occasionally oppressive, but also provided social cohesion during difficult times. People looked out for their neighbors because the structure demanded it, and because isolation was dangerous. Public baths remained popular despite fuel shortages that limited their hours. The Sento provided not just hygiene but social connection. Women gathered in the afternoon when possible, exchanging news, sharing concerns, maintaining relationships that sustained community life. The ritual of bathing carried meanings beyond cleanliness, renewal, connection, a brief escape from the demands of wartime existence. Small shops specialized in ways that seemed impractical, but persisted through tradition and necessity. A store might sell only brushes, writing brushes, cleaning brushes, brushes for specific craft purposes. Another dealt exclusively in paper goods, from writing paper to wrapping materials. These narrow specializations reflected older patterns of commerce, guild traditions, family businesses passed down through generations. The war had reduced their inventory but not eliminated their presence. By 8 o'clock, the city was fully awake and engaged in its routines. Workers at their stations, students in their classrooms, shopkeepers serving the trickle of customers, clerks processing papers, housewives planning meals from inadequate supplies. The heat built steadily, promising another sweltering day. People adjusted their expectations, their pace, their activities to accommodate the weather. The sky remained clear. A single weather reconnaissance plane had passed over earlier, around 7, prompting a brief alert that was quickly lifted. All clear. The day proceeded. People returned to their work, their conversations, their small personal concerns. Markets operated on reduced schedules, but maintained their essential character. Vendors called out their offerings, though the variety had shrunk drastically. What fish arrived from the morning's catch sold quickly. Vegetables from nearby farms appeared in small quantities. People bargained, not aggressively but persistently, trying to stretch their purchasing power. Market transactions formed a social network as much as an economic one. Information exchanged along with goods, relationships maintained through repeated interactions. The postal system continued functioning with remarkable reliability. Letters moved between cities, between the home front and military units deployed across the Pacific Theater. Writing paper had become precious, every sheet used completely, margins filled with tiny script. People chose their words carefully, knowing that censors would read everything, that certain topics were forbidden, that expressions of doubt or despair might bring official attention. A woman hung laundry in a small courtyard, white cloth bright against dark wooden walls. The fabric would dry quickly in the heat. She worked methodically, shaking out each piece, securing it with wooden pins. Domestic labor filled enormous portions of women's time, cooking, cleaning, mending, managing households with inadequate resources and absent hands. The work was invisible until it stopped, essential but rarely acknowledged. An elderly man swept the entrance to a small temple, his movements slow and deliberate. The broom whispered against stone. He had performed this task for decades, through peace and war, through prosperity and hardship. The ritual mattered more than the result, the act of caring for the space, of maintaining standards when everything else seemed to be deteriorating. Hiroshima in the summer of 1945 was a city of persistence, not defiance, not enthusiasm, not despair, just persistence. People did what needed doing because stopping was not an option. They fed their children, went to work, maintained their homes, honored their obligations. The grand narratives of war and politics played out somewhere else, in decisions made by people they would never meet, affecting futures they could not predict. The morning continued. Clocks marked the passage of time. The heat intensified. A streetcar rounded a corner, its bell clanging. A child laughed in a schoolyard. A clerk stamped another document. A factory machine continued its rhythmic operation. Life proceeded in its countless small actions, each person navigating their particular circumstances, connected to others through geography and shared situation, but fundamentally alone in their experience. This was Hiroshima on a Tuesday morning in August, a city of rivers and bridges, of streetcars and small shops, of factories and homes, of people doing what people do, working, eating, caring for each other, managing the demands of another day. The ordinary texture of human existence, unremarkable, except in its fundamental humanity. If you enjoyed this journey through a single morning in Hiroshima, please subscribe to the channel for more historical reconstructions. Each video attempts to bring the past to life through careful research and immersive storytelling. Leave a like if you found this perspective valuable, and share it with others interested in understanding how people actually lived in different times and places. History is built from countless ordinary mornings like this one.